Today I'm going to teach you how to make some really basic and delicious pizza dough. First, we're going to start off with 3 3/4 cups of all-purpose flour, which I have here in the bowl. You could also use 00 Caputo flour, which is what they'll be using in Italy. It's a finer milled flour. Protein's a little bit different. If I've got it, I always use that one. But for today, we're going to stick with what most people have in the pantry, and that's all-purpose flour. We're going to put that in our bowl here. We're going to make a little well in the center of it to put all of our ingredients. Now you could do this out on the table. I like doing the bowl a little bit easier. While you could use a mixer, I like doing it by hand. That way I'm not going to over knead the dough. While typically you're going to make a lot of doughs to a full gluten development, so they're really elastic, I don't want to take this too long because we're going to let it ferment in the refrigerator for 2 days. It's going to give plenty of time for hydrating and really firming up those bonds in the gluten. So to this, what we're going to add next is I've got salt, 2½ teaspoons of salt. I'm using kosher salt here, and I can sprinkle that in. We've got 3/4 teaspoon of active yeast. All right, you want to use active yeast for this. You can also use bread machine yeast for this. That way I can add it straight into the mix here. I don't have to worry about rehydrating or anything. So sprinkle that in, all the dry, give that a quick little mix, reform your well into the center. And to this, I've got 1 1/3 cups of lukewarm water. Not cold, not too warm. That can go straight into the center. And then I've got 2 teaspoons of honey. If you don't have honey, you can use agave syrup. You could also use just 2 tablespoons of sugar. Really, we just need sugar in there. Honey just adds a little bit better flavor. So I'm going to scoop that all out. I'm not worried about my hands too dirty because they're about to get a lot dirtier. Now, dive right in. We want to bring this all together into a nice dough. You're going to get messy. Why not? That's okay. So your dough is going to slowly come together. It's going to be messy. That's fine. Dive right in with your other hand. What I like to do is kind of just toss it around, let everything, all that moisture come in contact with the flour. Move this all around like so. And again, don't worry about trying to scrape it off your hands too much because as the dough comes together, it's going to naturally pull off of your hands. So I'm just kind of making sure all that moisture hits the flour. At this point, you can kind of pull a little bit of that dough off your hands. Now, if you were really concerned about getting messy, could you use a wooden spoon? Most definitely. But I'm not too worried about getting messy right now. So I'm just going to grab everything. Right, until we have this kind of like shaggy mass texture to the dough. At that point, what I can do is I can turn it out onto the bench. We're going to take a look at good kneading technique. I'm going to start kneading this. What I'm going to use is the heel of my hand here. Got bracelets and such. Should probably take those off at this point. They're going to get messy. Use the heel of the hand to push down and then fold over. Right now it's pretty loose, but it will come together. So I'm going to start folding it onto itself so it comes together as a uniform mass. And this is when we start pushing down with the heel of our hand. Arm is straight, rotate, do it again, straight back into itself. Always kind of collecting all those extra bits as we come around. Always pulling everything together. You want to make sure you have a good enough space to make this. Now you could do this in the bowl, but it's going to be a lot easier to take it out of the bowl to do it. If you're worried about messing your kitchen, you can always just put a cutting board down. Do it on the cutting board. That'll always work. Not everybody has a wood bench. You can also just do this on any flat surface. A glass table will work. So you can see that we've incorporated all of these basics here. So now we're just going to knead. So it's pushing down, rotate, pushing down, rotate. When I come back, I fold it onto itself. So it's always that motion. It's going to get really sticky at first. We're still waiting for a lot of that starch in the flour to absorb the water. But as we're kneading here, it's going to start absorbing all that water and start tightening up. Now, as we stretch out all those gluten strands, we're going to end up with a chewy dough. But again, we don't want to overwork the dough. So I'm going to knead this for about 3 to 5 minutes. Now that I've been kneading the dough for a couple minutes, I can really see that it's nice and elastic. If I was to take a piece of dough off and start to kind of gently pull it apart, I can see this kind of window starting to open up. I can see the elastic strands kind of developing in it. But I don't want it to be too ultra thin with that membrane. This is going to ensure that I have a chewy dough, but not too chewy. And that makes the perfect New York style or a Neapolitan kind of pizza. Now, what you want to do next is take this dough. Got a little bit of hand spray here. Just a light coating. I'm going to cover that with plastic, and I'm going to let that rest for about 15 to 20 minutes. When we come back, we're going to slice it up, roll it into rounds, and get it ready for resting for a slow fermentation in the fridge. To finish up our dough for its little nap for 2 days, what we're going to do is we're going to unwrap the plastic. We have our dough here. Now, I like to use this is a bench knife or a dough cutter, depending on where you're buying it from. All right, but I like to use this to cut in half. A chef's knife, paring knife will also do. Visually divide the whole thing in quarters. So in half, then half again. So we have 4 equal pizzas. And then we need to round out the dough. To round each dough, what we're going to want to do is, one at a time, you want to take the kind of the sides here, kind of fold them into the center. With those seams down, you're going to make a cupping motion with your dominant hand. What we're going to do is going to round this out, and you see that I have no flour or anything on the table. I want the dough to grip onto the table. So what I'm doing is I'm rounding out to the side of my hand, coming in with my thumb, pushing in, and going around. I want the dough to kind of stay in place. And what I'm doing is I'm actively pulling the outside of the dough. That's going to make it round, and all the seams are here on the bottom. Now it takes some practice to get it right, but hey, I've got 4 to show you. So it's rounding and just exaggerating it here around in a circle, really scooping into my fingertips here. All right, do one, set it aside. Next one, same thing. I'm going to fold those into the back, seams down, and round. I'm actively pushing down, a little bit of pressure, not straight down, but at an angle. Following a circular motion. It only takes a couple times once you have the technique down, but it should be nice and round. They should be relatively uniform. One more. Practice makes perfect. And when you get really good, you can do 2 at a time. That's like level 2. You guys are at level 1. That's the same technique with both hands. Now, if you round the dough really well here, it's going to be a lot easier to make round pizzas on the next step. So what we'll need here is a tray or a plate or a deep casserole dish, something where these are going to have room to expand, because they're so big now, right? But they're going to be about yay big a little later. But if we were to put those just straight on the tray, we're going to have a problem. So I just have some oil. Olive oil, if you had it, you can use pan spray. Just a little bit down. Coat the entire pan. Make sure to get the sides too. This dough is going to expand as the yeast is munching down on all that sugar in the honey, as well as all the starch in the flour. We also want to do just a dab of olive oil onto each one. So if you get all 4 of them on there, just a little dab. We're going to coat the outside of each one in just a little bit of oil as well. This will prevent it from sticking to the plastic wrap that's going to go on the outside. So stagger them on there, right? I would do a light press down, and then you're going to wrap this with plastic. You're going to wrap it all the way around, including the bottom, both directions. We don't want any air getting in here. Just by laying plastic on top, I can guarantee you your dough is going to dry out and you're going to have a problem. So here's the dough all wrapped up. You see there's plastic on the top, bottom, all the way around it. All right, this is going to go into the fridge. Standard fridge is around 40 degrees Fahrenheit, sometimes a little bit less. So this can go for up to 2, max 3 days in the refrigerator to retard long term. Retarding means to ferment over a long period of time at a cool temperature. You can also, if you wanted to use it right away, let it ferment for about 2 to 3 hours at room temperature with a damp towel over top of it. That will also work. You just get less flavor. The reason why we let this sit for 2 days is really just slow fermentation. That's going to give us a lot of flavor and a more chewy crust. So next time we see this, we'll be making pizza.